We're looking at systems of equations, question number 1. And this question is going to take a couple of minutes, so bear with me, but there's a few really important concepts to hit here. First of all, we've got Huey and Lewis working for 2 different newspaper printing companies. So these companies print newspapers for the newspapers, and each printing company charges an initial fee. So there's our initial value. And then they have a rate, and the fixed rate per page is how much they charge per page for printing. So Huey's company charges $5,000 flat out, no matter how many pages you print, and then 5 cents a page, $0.05, 5 cents a page. Lewis's company charges more up front. They charge $7,600 for you to print your newspapers there, but they only charge you 3 cents a page after that. So this is going to allow us to generate 2 equations. Y is equal to AX plus B for Huey, and Y is equal to AX plus B for Lewis. For Huey, Y is going to equal A, 0.05, X plus 5,000. Whereas for Lewis, we're looking at 0.03, 3 cents per page, plus 7,600. Now, I'll bring the calculator in because we're going to need it here. I just wanted to get it out of my way while I was writing. We're going to sketch a graph of these 2 equations. It says down here they want us to kind of get a visual representation of what these can look like. And we're not going to graph accurately, but we need to kind of be mindful about what these numbers mean. So if you think of the initial values for starters, we got Huey starting off at 5 G's and we got Lewis starting off at 7,600. We know that these are B's. These are initial values. And because their initial values are B's, we know where they go on the graph. These are y-intercepts. And so for Huey, 0,5,000, let's say that's somewhere, let's say right about there. And I'll label that as 0, 5,000. And I'll put a little h over it just to indicate that that's Huey's initial value. Lewis, on the other hand, he charges more up front, right? He charges $7,600, so that initial value is going to be a little bit above. It doesn't really matter where. We're just sketching to show the difference, really, between the 2 guys' charging structures. So Lewis is starting off at 7,600. Whoops. Instead of 5,000, so 0, 7,600, 5,000. Say that again, 0, 7,600, and that's for Lewis. So Huey and Lewis. Now, their lines that are going to come off of them, we don't know exactly what they're going to look like because we don't have grid lines here, but here's what we know. Huey charges more per page. In other words, his slope or his rate of change is higher than Lewis's rate of change. And that means that the line should be steeper. Huey's line should go up faster than Lewis's line, right? His charge, what he charges at the end of a printing job, although it starts off lower, is going to accelerate quicker because he's charging 5 cents a page instead of 3 cents a page. So Huey's line should be steeper than Lewis's line. Now, how much steeper, we're guesstimating here. But you can see that Huey, I've made that line much steeper than Lewis's. Lewis starts off higher, but he doesn't climb as fast because his charge is lower. What's interesting about this situation is there is one point, because their slopes are different, right? Because their rates of change are different, there is a place, and only really one place on the graph, where if I measure their x's and I measure their y's, they will have exactly the same x and y. There's one place where for a certain number of pages printed and a certain price point, they'll actually have the same numbers. So if you look at the question, at what point does it not matter which company is chosen to print the newspapers? That's really code for asking you, hey, when is it that these guys have the same number of pages being printed at the same cost, regardless of the fact they have different initial values and different slopes? That's a really fancy way of saying solve a system. A system of equations just means two equations, and we're looking for the point where they intersect. Now, to do that, we use a method called the comparison method most frequently. And the comparison method has 4 steps. And first step is going to be to isolate y in both equations. Well, if you look at my 2 equations, that's already done for me. I've got y equals ax plus b, and I got y equals ax plus b. So that step is done. Step 2 says take those right-hand sides, drop the y's, and make the right-hand sides of the equations, so make this equal to that. And the reason we can do that is because y equals this and y equals that and y equals y. Since this equals this and this equals this, that means this equals this. And so we can make them equal to each other, but we're doing it for a reason. And you might see the reason when I say equate them, it means make them equal to each other. And that you can see the reason when we set it up. Check it out. This is 0.05x plus 5,000. And that's going to be equal to 0.03x plus 7,600. And what's happened here is the y's have gone away. And I'm just down to x's. And that means I can solve. I can solve for x. And if I can solve for x, I can solve for y, and I can find out where that point is. So I'm going to solve for x. That's the third step. I'm going to solve for x right now. I'm going to subtract 0.03x from the left, and I'm going to subtract 0.03x from the right, from both sides, left and right, in order to get rid of that over there. Bring all my x's to one side is how some people like to say it. And when you do that, you're going to get 0.02x plus 5,000 is equal to 7,600. Okay, so I subtracted that term. Now I'm going to try and isolate this x by subtracting my 5,000. And that's going to leave me with 0.02x is equal to 7,600 minus 5,000 is 2,600. And now, last step is going to be divide both sides by 0.02. And when I do that, I get x is equal to, now this one I'll need the calculator, 2,600 divided by 0.02, grand total $130,000. So 130 grand is, 130,000 pages, x is pages, printed, is how many pages will be printed by both companies when they charge the same. The question is, how much are they charging for those 130,000 pages? What is that y? Well, how do we get that? Well, we have equations and we have an x. So if we put the x into one of those 2 equations, we should get the corresponding y. And since we know the y's are the same at this point, it really doesn't matter which of the 2 equations we pick. We could plug the x into this x, or we could plug that x of 130,000 into that x. It doesn't really matter. It can go there, or it can go there. Either way, we're going to get the same answer for the y, and I'll show you that in 2 seconds here. I'll start off by doing it in equation number 1 for Huey here. So I'm going to write down y is equal to 0.05 times x, 130,000, plus 5,000. And when I do that, I get y is equal to, so 130,000 times 0.05 is equal to 6,500, and then I have to add to that the 5,000. And I get 11,500. And remember, that 11,500, that's dollars. Now, what if you had plugged in, instead of putting your 130,000 into Huey, what if you'd put it into Louis? Well, it's exactly the same procedure, except instead of doing the substitution in the first equation, you would have done the substitution in the second equation. I'm running out of room a little bit here, but bear with me. I'm just going to move my calculator a little bit up, and I'll do that right here. So y is equal to, so this time I'll do the substitution down below here for Louis. Y is equal to 0.03x plus 7,600. And in order to see what that looks like, we're just going to do the same thing. Y is equal to 0.03 times 130,000 plus 7,600. And I'm going to just go right to the calculator and do that whole thing now in one shot. So 0.03 times 130,000. Make sure I have the right number of zeros there. Hit equals. And then I'm going to add 7,600 because I'm dealing with Louis over here. And when I do that, there it is, 11,500. It's a great way of checking to make sure you haven't made any mistakes. That fourth step, once you've solved your x, was plug it in, right? Plug in x to get y. And that now is the answer to my question here. 11,500 bucks is how much it'll cost if they both print 130,000 pages. Before 130,000, they have different fees. After 130,000 pages printed, they have different fees, different Ys. But at that point, 130,000, same charge. That's the solution to the system. And this right here, those 4 steps, is how you're going to solve using the comparison method, because we're comparing both sets of equations. Isolate y, drop the y's and make them equal to each other. Solve for x, plug in that x that you solved to get your y into either equation.